Hi, and welcome to our video about AeroPress Brewing Variables. If you haven't already done so, please hit that red button to subscribe to the channel so that you're not going to miss out on any of the episodes that we put out. This video is about different things that you can adjust when brewing on the AeroPress to get different results in the cup. There are a lot of brewing recipe videos, and those are really useful if what you're after is a finished product. I figured that what might actually be a bit more useful in our case is a video that helped you understand what the variables are that you have to play with. These variables are the little things that you're able to control in the recipe to change how that cup of coffee tastes. A lot of people love the AeroPress because of its versatility and all the different ways that you can brew with it. But in truth, that can be a source of frustration too. When there's lots of options available to you, making informed decisions about how to change your recipe to affect the coffee at the end can start to feel a little bit like guesswork. So a few years ago, James Hoffman came up with these. It's a set of 5 dice with each die representing a different aspect of an AeroPress brewing recipe on it. The idea is pretty simple. Each roll of the dice comes up with a different set of brewing variables, and together they make a new recipe. Now, we're not going to get really geeky about the science of extraction here. There are a lot of resources online that can help you with that, but there is like a basic concept that we'll really need to grasp, and that's what a cup of coffee is and how it's achieved. Coffee, the drink, is a solution. And so by way of a very basic explanation, what that means is that to make a cup of coffee, we actually take a certain percentage of the ground coffee and dissolve it into the water that we're brewing with. And this process is called extraction. For a cup of well-roasted coffee to taste really great, we actually want to extract a certain percentage of that coffee across. Now, I'm not going to go into the numbers or the calculations in great detail, but there are a couple of terms that we want to grasp before we move on. When we extract too much of the ground coffee into the water, we end up with coffee that is over-extracted. If we don't extract enough, that coffee is going to be under-extracted. Somewhere in the middle there is a cup of coffee that's properly extracted. Both over-extracted and under-extracted coffee have really telltale characteristics that we can pick up on when we taste it. If you're brewing with a reasonably fresh, reasonable quality and well-roasted coffee, an under-extracted brew is going to taste quite sour. So you want to think unpleasant lemon, thinness in the cup, low sweetness, and probably a very abrupt or short finish. Coffee that's over-extracted is going to be completely dominated by bitterness. So think a really aggressive and unpleasant medicinal sort of taste. The coffee as well could well be dry, hollow. It's probably going to have a very astringent, lingering finish too. So when we're tweaking an AeroPress recipe, what we're really doing is nudging that extraction up or down. We're trying to land it in that middle ground of properly extracted coffee. And properly extracted coffee will taste sweet and rich and full, provided it's been roasted well. There are 6 variables that we're going to look at, and yes, I'm aware that there are quite a few more, but we also need to save something to talk about in future videos. The 6 that we're going to focus on today are really the fundamentals. They're the ones that you want to grasp and understand first, and they're also the ones that are most frequently referenced in AeroPress recipes. The brew ratio is literally how much ground coffee in relation to how much water you're going to use. Generally speaking, across all the different ways that I brew coffee, I start with 60 grams of coffee per litre of water. The Specialty Coffee Association recommends a range of between 55 grams per litre and 65 grams per litre. For the AeroPress, that means that you're generally going to be using between 14 and 16 grams of ground coffee for 250 grams of water. Increasing the coffee side of this ratio, so using more ground coffee to the same amount of water, generally increases the strength. It also really increases the intensity of the flavour, but not necessarily always in a good way. Whatever brew ratio you choose, you just need to be aware that the more coffee you use, the harder it is to extract that coffee. My advice is to always start at 60 grams per litre and then just very gently nudge your recipe from there. Our next two variables are linked, or at least they should be, and that's why we have them on the same dice. These two are grind size and our brew time. In order to extract the soluble material we want out of the ground coffee, the first thing we need to do is dramatically increase the surface area, and we do this by grinding the beans. This increase in surface area means that the water can do the work that it needs to in extracting those solubles. It's the same reason that we grind spices before cooking with them. It helps unlock all the flavour that's within. We're going to leave aside the question of grind quality for today. Today we're just going to focus on grind size. When we grind coffee very fine, what we're doing is making lots and lots and lots of tiny, tiny, tiny pieces of coffee, which is more easy for the water to extract. The opposite is true of coarsely ground coffee. We're leaving those coffee chunks in bigger pieces and there's fewer of them. In both cases, we're making it easier for the water to do its job. When we grind very fine, we're making it really, really easy for the water to extract what it needs. If we leave the coffee coarse, not as much. This is why our next variable, brew time, is also linked to grind size. Brew time is literally how long we let the water and the coffee sit together in the brew chamber of the AeroPress. It's really how long we allow the water to do its job. Brew time is linked to grind size because if we've ground the coffee very fine, we only want to allow the coffee and the water to be in contact for a short amount of time. Otherwise, there's a pretty good chance that we're going to over extract. We're going to take too much out of the coffee and into the water. And on the other end of the spectrum, if we choose to use a coarse grind, we're going to need to allow the coffee and the water more time together in order to extract what we need out of it. Water is the vehicle that's doing the extraction in this process, and how hot that water is kind of equates to how much energy we give it to do the job. The hotter the water, the more easily the water can extract those desirable solubles out of the ground coffee. For medium to light roasted coffee, I would really suggest using water that's just off the boil. By its name, the next variable might not be instantly recognizable. The bloom is essentially how we set the ground coffee up to be extracted. We do this by adding a small amount of water for a short amount of time. This saturates the ground coffee and also allows a lot of carbon dioxide to escape. And this gets the coffee ready to be extracted. Easily the most decorative of our brewing dice, agitation, when it comes to the AeroPress, really means stirring. Now, stirring is kind of tricky to quantify, but we've done our best. The point of a recipe is that it's a set of instructions that you can share with someone and have them repeat it fairly easily. And an elaborate stirring technique is pretty tricky to replicate. Your best bet here is a gentle, repeatable stirring technique, something that you can explain to other people and remember how to do yourself. So now we know where we want to arrive. We want to extract a certain percentage of this ground coffee into our brewing water. Getting that percentage right is going to determine whether the cup is delicious or whether it's sour or whether it's bitter. Now we know as well what variables we have to control that extraction, ways that we can nudge it up and nudge it down. But here's what makes the AeroPress kind of really fun and really versatile. There are thousands of different ways to get to a properly extracted cup of coffee. Because different solubles extract at different stages in the process, there are hundreds of different ways that these variables can come together to make a delicious cup of coffee. That's why there's a World AeroPress Championship every year, and why competitors using the same beans can produce completely different results. Many of them are really delicious, not all of them are, but they're generally speaking really different. You could take this sample of coffee and you could use a fine grind, a very short brew time, lots and lots of stirring and super hot water, and that might bring out more of the citrus and floral notes. You could do a low dose, you could do a long brew time with coarsely ground coffee, no stirring at all, and the brew temperature down around 85 degrees. There's a pretty good chance that that's going to give you a rounded, more toffee-like result. But now that you have a better understanding of the variables that you have to play with, it's really up to you to experiment with the coffee and see how they change the beans that you have. So thanks for watching. As always, comments below, greatly appreciated. Tell me, how do you brew coffee? Have you tried brewing with the AeroPress dice? Thanks for watching.